As one blockade has come down, another one has gone up. To talk more about it is Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilley. Brian, this latest blockade is where my kids live and where you have strong roots as well, in Hamilton, Ontario.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of whack-a-mole, isn't it? Right? Like one comes down, another pops up, and the politicians and police have to go around and try and stop it. This is for people that don't know the region. Think of the map from your, grade 5 geography class. Lake Ontario. Hamilton is at the very tip of Lake Ontario as you go from one side to the other. So any trade, any trains, whether it's commuter, passenger, or freight trains that are going between Toronto and either the Niagara region or down into the United States, they're going to go through this junction. So literally tens of thousands of people take the commuter train. It's called the GO train. You've probably heard about this now. The GO train, it's a great system in terms of making it cost effective and comfortable for people to get out of their cars and get on a commuter train. That shut down between Niagara and Burlington, just the other side of Hamilton. There is a regular daily via slash Amtrak train. All right. It's run between the two of them that goes between Toronto and New York City. That is either being shut down or rerouted at this point, and all the freight traffic, which is significant. I mean, we keep talking about, via passengers or GO train passengers. The big thing is freight trains, and freight trains are either being shut down or forced to be rerouted. CN and CP are now sharing tracks, and people might say, well, that's easy, just share the road. No, look, both of these, not only are they competitors, but the fact is that they are filled to capacity, whether we're talking about shipping grain or oil or cars or any other goods. Now, I was speaking with Dan Kelly from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business earlier today. We were chatting on the radio, Hal, and he's telling me about small dealerships in places like St. John's, Newfoundland. They have to rely on the cars being shipped from Ontario by train to Halifax, then put on a ship that takes them to Newfoundland before they can be put on trucks and taken to the dealership. So all of these things are really impacting the business community, whether we're talking about Indigenous-owned businesses or non-Indigenous Indigenous-owned businesses.
Now, you believe we can expect to see even more blockades in the future? Why is that?
Well, because the Trudeau government has been very weak in their response to all of this. And so, this is not a partisan statement. They dithered far too long on this. This is a question of, the prime minister spent too much time in Africa campaigning for that United Nations Security Council seat. And he essentially rewarded bad behavior. And when you reward bad behavior, you get more of it. And so Monday morning, the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, went into Tyendinaga, that's the Mohawk Reserve near Belleville, after 19 days. 19 days of allowing these blockades to continue, and said, okay, you got to clear out now. Immediately, by the end of the day, 5:45 at night, they set up the camp in Hamilton. Then there were road blockades in Caledonia, just a little bit further away from Hamilton, but near the Mohawk Six Nations Reserve. There are blockades elsewhere in British Columbia, in Quebec, and we're going to keep seeing whack-a-mole because the protesters have been told by the government, we're not going to do too much to you. And I understand that people want to say, well, the police forces should just go in and take them out now. The police forces have been given the message by various governments, both provincial and federal, and in this case, really, it's the federal government that matters, that if you do something, we may not necessarily have your back.
What's interesting, too, west of Edmonton, there was a blockade set up, and anti-protesters came in, confronted the protesters, and the protesters said, hey, we don't want any trouble here. So they actually physically removed and hauled away all the blockades in their trucks and took off. So,
Yeah, and then when Peter MacKay said that this was a good thing, he was accused of encouraging vigilantism. I didn't take McKay's statement to be an endorsement of vigilantism. It was just, it was, if you watch the whole thing, and look, I have more time than other people. I spent a lot of time watching the live stream, and the guys that hauled away the stuff in their pickup truck spent a long time talking to the protesters. And they were back and forth and they were respectful. And at the end of the day, they said, all right, look, you guys need to go. We're taking this away. And the protester says, "Well, okay, we won't get in your way."
Brian, the Tech Frontier Mine proposal was withdrawn this past week. Cabinet was supposed to make a decision, but the company backed out, and you say this has everything to do with the blockades and other canceled energy projects.
Well, imagine that you're Vancouver-based tech, industries, and you're looking at this tech resources, sorry, and you're looking at everything that's going on, and you're watching as a pipeline proposal that goes from one corner of British Columbia to another corner of British Columbia, a pipeline proposal that has been approved by the National Energy Board, a pipeline proposal that has been endorsed by all 20 First Nations across the entire route of the pipeline, can't be built. Well, at that point, you're looking and saying, okay, what chance do I have? And, some people are saying, well, this is Jason Kenney's fault. He doesn't have a proper carbon tax. But others are saying, well, it's Justin Trudeau's fault. He didn't deal with it. There's probably a lot of blame to go around, but I would lay more blame at the feet of the federal government over this. And the simple fact is that Tech Resources looked at the situation and basically told people, look, you guys get your act together and then we'll come back. Maybe we'll look at this in the future. I know that some are saying this is because the price of oil is so low. And people are saying, well, oil's only $55 a barrel. That is actually not what Canadian oil companies are getting for their oil at this moment. They're getting far less. And that's a problem, Hal. But what you have to realize is that if you're looking at a 20, 30, 40-year mine project, you're not basing it on the price of oil today. You're not saying, well, oil's only this much today, so we will or won't go forward. You're going to be hopeful that you'll be able to get enough out of this mine project in the future. And the Tech Frontier mine was going to be among the lowest carbon emissions oil projects in the world, not just in the oil sands, but in the world. And they still didn't feel that they had the ability to go forward. An awful lot of that blame has to lie with the federal government.
And we're going to feel a lot of that right here in our province of Alberta. Brian, Andrew Scheer's reaction to Trudeau on both tech and the blockades was to allegedly call our Prime Minister weak. Brian Scheer has been a force lately. Is it because he's got nothing to lose since he's on his way out?
I think some of it might be that. Some of it might be the people that are around him at this point. But, if you watched him, in the emergency debate, I guess it was about a week or so ago, a little over a week ago, where the prime minister stood up and described why he was so concerned about everything, but said we've got to deal with dialogue, and we can't ask these blockades to come down. And Scheer stood up and said, "That's the weakest response I've ever heard." Well, Justin Trudeau's response to that was to say, "Well, you've disqualified yourself from having conversations with us." By the end of the week, Justin Trudeau had endorsed Andrew Scheer's position on the issue of, Tech Frontier. Justin Trudeau held a conference call, or sorry, not a conference call, but individual calls with all the opposition leaders to tell them about what was happening with the blockades and what was happening to Tech Frontier. And in that call, Scheer said directly to Trudeau, "You are weak on this, and you need to do better." This, I can't help but think if we had seen this Andrew Scheer during the election campaign, it might have been a very different result.
What's the latest within the Tory caucus itself when it comes to support for new leader? Does Peter MacKay still lead the way? Aaron O'Toole, Marilyn Gladu? Apparently you spent some time with both MacKay and O'Toole recently.
So I was down in Niagara Falls over the past weekend for the Ontario Progressive Conservative Policy Conference. And all the party hopefuls, all the serious ones, had hospitality suites there. Peter MacKay and Aaron O'Toole were on the Friday night. Marilyn Gladu was Saturday. I just want to tell people I wasn't at the Gladu suite because by the end of Saturday, Hal, I just wanted to go home and go to bed and not think about work anymore. But at the MacKay suite and the O'Toole suite, I can't say that there was a major difference in terms of energy or support. There was not the same buzz around Marilyn Gladu, who was there for the whole weekend, as there was around O'Toole and MacKay. But, when it comes to the two guys at the top at this point, yeah, MacKay has the name recognition. MacKay has a bit of the mojo, you might say. But the idea that Aaron O'Toole should be counted out, no, you can't do that. I keep pointing out that in 2017, the guy came from people thinking that Aaron O'Toole was Aaron, a woman, to, because they didn't know who he was, to finishing in third place. And now this guy is running essentially a flawless campaign. And while McKay keeps making missteps and stepping on the puck a little bit, O'Toole keeps skating forward. He keeps doing the right thing. So I think that O'Toole is catching up to him. Has he caught up to him at this point? Probably not, but it's closer than a lot of people would think.
According to a latest Nanos poll, Brian, the Conservatives have edged a little bit ahead of the Liberals in terms of support. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, still about a third of Canadians would support the Liberals if an election were held today, according to the Nanos poll. But it's just about 36% say, "Oh, yeah, these Conservatives, they're not looking too bad." All of this happening within the context of the blockades, of Tech Frontier, of everything that's happening, and I think people are starting to sense that Justin Trudeau is not the leader that we need at this moment. Will that, stand? Will that stick? That remains to be seen. Politics can be a very fluid game, as you know, Hal, and things can change in a matter of week. What a week is a year in politics. Things can change between now and whenever a non-confidence vote will happen. I get daily email messages and tweets and texts saying, why won't these guys bring them down? Why won't there be a non-confidence vote? Well, because the Conservatives could try that, but they don't have the backing of the NDP or the Bloc Québécois at this point. So the idea that you can just bring them down by yourself, no, they don't have the votes to do that, and they won't have that anytime soon. But considering that the Conservatives are essentially leaderless, but ahead by a couple of points, that's not a bad place to be at this point. We'll see how that plays out. Sometimes leaderless parties do better than those with the leader in charge. And we're dealing with that in Ontario right now, where the Ford government is less popular than the leaderless Liberals. But every time they poll with the guy that's expected to win the Ontario Liberal leadership, they just kind of fall way off the cliff, and Doug Ford comes out on top. So we'll see what happens with the federal Conservatives.
Brian, an attempt by the Canadian government to buy new fighter jets is delayed by at least 3 more months. Did our check bounce?
You might think so. You might be wondering, oh, wait a minute, weren't we supposed to have these by now? We were supposed to have them a long time ago. Look, Hal, these fighter jets came in to service before I was in double digits in age. I'm 48 years old now, and we should have replaced them a long time ago. And you and I, when we worked together in Ottawa, this was the issue at the time. And we're talking what now? Probably 2012, 2013. This was the big issue at that time. Justin Trudeau won the 2015 election, said, I won't buy the F-35, but I'll pick another plane. Well, 4 years later, he hadn't picked another plane. And, without this further delay, at best, they had said by 2026, we'll pick another plane and have it going. This just keeps delaying it. We are not anywhere close to picking new planes, and it's a further condemnation of how we do military procurement in this country, because everything, absolutely everything, is politicized.
And we spent more than $1 billion on developing Canada's new frigates and supply ships, but Brian, we have nothing yet that floats.
Yeah, I mean, we could put rubber duckies in, and they'd just be as good as what we've got now. So again, back to the idea that nothing that we do when it comes to military procurement is actually good in this country. It's all politicized. It's all about regional benefits. It's all about making sure that the right companies are paid off, that the right companies get the contracts. It's not about actually making sure that we've got the best equipment for our men and women in uniform. And some people would say, well, this goes back to the First World War or before. Absolutely. This is an ongoing problem. It is not liberal. It is not conservative. It is part of the system. And, to quote Shakespeare, a pox on all their houses. But at this point, the Liberals came in saying they were going to be different than the Harper Conservatives. They were going to fix all of this. We don't have supply ships. We don't have fighter jets. And guess what? Just to add on to this, are subs that we bought when Jean Chrétien was still prime minister, and a long way from retiring, by the way, because it was the 90s. They still don't float.
Toronto journalist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.